Okay, I have 1 million subscribers on YouTube. I've been doing this for years. I've talked to a million people, whether it's through comments, DMs, directly, social media, whatever. 99% of people still don't know what Bitcoin is. And I know that's going to upset a lot of people, especially on this podcast, but I think most people, I know everyone wants to talk price. For me, the base case has always been, they have to keep printing, period. I mean, dude, it has to be bigger Bitcoin.
Marko, thank you so much for joining me here today.
My pleasure, Brandon. Thank you for having me.
So for those who don't know Marko, he has his YouTube channel. I don't know how you don't know Marko at this point, but Marko WhiteBoard Finance has taught millions of people on YouTube for almost a decade now. And, financial literacy, how to make money, how to retire, and really the ins and outs, more importantly, the ins and outs of the financial system. And as we were talking about offline, we're going to talk about here today of what people don't know, what the 99% just don't know. And how we're transitioning. We're in the middle. I mean, Scott Bessent, here's something we didn't even talk about yet, but I mean, Scott Bessent just said, hey, basically, I want to be a part of this new Bretton Woods. I want to be part of this new monetary transition that we're in. So we have people actively in power that are seeking a new monetary transition, which we haven't had for, in essence, kind of a century, we'll say, or maybe at least 50 years since, gold was taken out of the money. And we don't have money anymore since 1971. So this is the study that we've been going down for years, and we're just sharing these stories, these war stories offline. But Marko, what is the past decade, the past 15 years been like for you? And what were these moments that really clicked for you all of a sudden, where Bitcoin became that thing where you started getting orange pill, maybe red pill, and you're just like, wow, like this is something that's going to really take us into this next monetary transition. And now the world's just kind of waking up on it.
Yeah. So I would say what I tell everyone when I meet them, whether it's in person at like a Bitcoin meetup or a conference or just online, is that I've been a Bitcoiner since before Bitcoin was even created. So I'd say basically like 05, 06 is when I kind of really started to understand how, the fiat monetary system works, the history of it, Bretton Woods, central banking, all that stuff. So I didn't even know I was a Bitcoiner until I started buying and studying Bitcoin in about 2017. That's when it made its run up. And I realized this whole time, I was like, wait a second, I already understand what this thing is without even taking the time to understand it. So first time I heard about Bitcoin was 2013, completely ignored it. I came from a traditional, financial background, finance degree, all that good stuff. And I kind of just dismissed it as kind of what everyone still somewhat dismisses it as in 2025 today. And that's just kind of like, it's just made up, whatever. This is just some new sort of digital beanie babies, right? Not to that extent, but that's kind of what I thought about it. Mm-hmm. And then when you actually start to study it and realize like, oh no, this is the greatest form of money ever created. And then you really start to get that conviction and all those second and third and fourth order effects that happen after understanding sound money, right? So started buying in basically late 2017, early 2018. I'm more of a dollar cost average kind of guy, even though I have lump summed many, many times. I believe what every other Bitcoiner believes is that it's going to keep going up and to the right? Number go up technology. And I always try and say that tongue in cheek, because even though it is kind of a meme, it really is, knock on wood, the truth, because of the limited supply, as we all know. So with all that being said, my journey, has been in kind of dipping my toe in both traditional finance and also sound money. So I kind of just, what I tell people is I play both sides of the game. I teach people financial literacy in the fiat world. I also bring up Bitcoin and sound money, and it's kind of up to my audience or whoever I'm talking to kind of just make their own decision, because to this day, man, in 2025, people still don't understand Bitcoin and they still think it's literally digital beanie babies. So it is what it is, and everyone gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve.
It is really wild. We were talking offline a little bit again about the Revolutionary War and this happening. Just do you think that it's going to be just bread and circus till things fall apart, and just, hey, we're just going to keep kicking the can down the road as far as we can perceivably go? I mean, look, you have the Doge stuff. I mean, they were trying to get rid of fraud, at least from what we can tell. I mean, none of us can verify or audit any of this stuff, which is the irony in all of this. And that's why Bitcoin's so amazing, because it's audited itself every 10 minutes. But they wanted to get rid of fraud, and you couldn't even get that done. Like I thought the world was about to end because people are trying to get rid of fraud. So are people, they don't even understand the system we're in now. like we've talked about. So is this something where we need a couple more percent of people to educate the people who have the ears to hear and the eyes to see, and that's who's going to pull us across the finish line? Or like how does this monetary transition plays out? As we talked about Scott Bessent too, like these guys are actively pushing, it looks like a sound money standard eventually, like a neutral world reserve currency, a neutral world reserve asset. Like where are we headed in the coming years here?
Yeah. So to answer the first part of your question, is it going to be bread and circus forever until we're, literally, it's like Wally, where you got the VR on your face and you're in the,
Scary
you're in
you
the
brought that up.
wheelchair. Yeah. Amazon's just delivered to you by drone. So to answer that part of the question, here's the way that I look at it. So if you look at, other empires, right? If you look at like Spanish Empire, British Empire, Russian Empire, whatever you want to call it, people in London aren't living in tents, rubbing sticks together to, light their, stoves and
Yep.
cook dinner, right? They still have some okay quality of life. Okay. Even though London has changed. I have cousins in London. I'm just using that as an example because that was the last, empire. You have the Dutch Empire, right?
Mm-hmm.
People in Amsterdam aren't sitting there living in tents, making
Yeah.
fires and, trying to survive. These people still have decent qualities of life. So I think whether America is in late stage empire or not, whether China's next or whoever's next, it doesn't matter because we're still going to have a decent quality of life here. Okay. I still believe that the United States in general is still the best country in the world to make something of yourself in one generation. You may not be able to do that in other continents or parts of the world. So I still believe in that. Hey, America's number one for opportunity, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where I do see it being kind of still bread and circus is, people don't even know what money is, as you alluded to earlier. So I have a personal finance channel. Okay. I have 1 million subscribers on YouTube. I've been doing this for years. I've talked to a million people, whether it's through comments, DMs, directly, social media, whatever. I've been teaching financial literacy online for almost 10 years now. I started my channel in 2017, and I've been a student of finance since basically 18 years old. I'm 37 now, so almost 20 years. I would say that 70 to 80% of people, just genuinely don't understand money in general. They're like, oh, what's a 401k? What's a Roth IRA? I think that's been getting better over the last 10 years. But even the 20, 30% that do understand money, they don't understand sound money. That's maybe a very small percentage of the population. So the way that I look at it, the mental exercise that I do is that if I was in a football stadium or a sports bar or a restaurant, I ask myself, out of this group of people, who can explain Bitcoin well? And that's maybe 1, 2, 3%. Some people may have heard of it. Some people may know what it is, but to actually be able to teach it to someone else shows that you have an understanding of what this thing is. So I still think we're at very, very, very early adoption. And I don't think we'll ever get to 40, 50% to, the people that can hear and see, to your example, just because people don't even understand the current monetary system, period. Whether it's US dollars or Bitcoin, people just don't understand money. It's not really how they operate. They're more interested in when are the Pittsburgh Steelers playing? When are the Browns playing? When are the Indians playing? Sorry, Guardians 2025, not Indians. All I'm trying to say is for it to become mainstream adopted, it needs to come from above. And above typically has been the Fed, the government, some force that just kind of forces it upon you, right? People don't understand, hey, I get paid every 2 weeks in US dollars. Now what do I do with this, magic money that was just ACH transferred into my bank account, right? Bitcoin is going to have to become that. It's just going to have to be forced upon people. And when I say forced, I don't mean literally forced. I mean, it just needs to become financialized. And that's where a lot of Bitcoiners don't like when I say that, because Bitcoin has always traditionally been plan B, opt out. It's the only true way we can opt out of this fiat system that we're currently in. But it needs to be the Trojan horse, in my opinion. So that's happening now through Wall Street. It's happening through BlackRock, Fidelity, Van Eck, all these big brokerage houses. And it's also happening on the corporate scale, Bitcoin treasury companies, also potentially with bit bonds on the federal level. So that all needs to become in the mix, because that's how humans operate today. And the paradigm needs to shift from, okay, I get paid in fiat every 2 weeks, to, hey, I can still invest in Bitcoin through my 401k, through my Roth IRA, through more traditional means. And I understand that that's controversial because it's still keeping Bitcoin within that financial system. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be a grassroots movement, dude. We've had it since 2009. 99% of people still don't know what Bitcoin is. And I know that's going to upset a lot of people, especially on this podcast, but I think it's the honest to God's truth.
Yeah. You touched on something massive. I think this is a story of our time, to be totally honest. It's the 3%. It's this revolutionary, cadre of people we need to find. And I don't know the answer. And I've had pushback because I've asked a lot of people this. It's like, what do you want in a crypto or, a Bitcoin bill? What do you want in to see no capital gains on Bitcoin taxes? And, one of my, like the Bitcoin Way, incredible group of guys, they sponsor the show.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, this is a new system. Like the F off government. I don't, get out of here, whatever. And then you have a lot of people that are, like we just said, Jack Muller's on stage in Prague, and he's obviously has a company. He's like ingrained in the financial system, but he's also giving a tear jerking, like F the government, blah, blah, blah speech, So it's like this weird world that Bitcoiners live in. It's
Mm-hmm.
very hard. And like, I come down the side of like that Bitcoin ethos, like we said, like the revolutionary, like our backgrounds are like, I wanted to be a fighter pilot or Navy SEAL growing up, but that's kind of changed. I don't know if I would do that now because my thoughts have changed for who I'm fighting for, what's actually happening. But
Exactly.
that's my like revolutionary, the man inside you wants to do that, like F off government. But like, unless you get the Trojan horse inside there, like if we're taxed to death right now, currently inside this fiat system, and I'm losing my Bitcoin because I'm trying to use it, how do you square that circle? Like, I feel like you have to get the Trojan horse in the wall somehow for you to sneak attack on the government, take down the central banks. Like, how do you create a separate system outside of everything and then like have everyone do it? I mean, you could theoretically might, but maybe it takes 50 years, 100 years. Like, do we all die in the process and like it just peters out? Like, I don't know. So I would love for you to like just tap into this a little more, like unpack some of your thoughts, because I feel like this is the argument of our time, basically.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. So my ethnicity, I'm born, in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm American, but my ethnicity is Serbian. Okay. Everyone knows about, Yugoslavia. It
Yeah.
was basically the EU before the EU was a thing, right? It was Southern Slavic states all put together, similar to how United States has 50 states. This had, I can't remember the exact number. Let's call it 7 or 8 states, right? So they went through a big civil war. A lot of it was due to geography. It's a mountainous area. Some cultures get divided through religion, through, whatever. Anyway, my point is, when you study like the breakup of a country like that, their money went through hyperinflation. I remember as a kid, I was like 9 years old. I was holding like million dinar bills, like
Wow.
million. People would go to the store to buy bread with 1 million dinars. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
now, the money's obviously stable. It's actually a really nice place to go to.
Yeah.
But in the 90s and, late 90s, early 2000s, that whole country was disintegrated. So to your point, people that didn't want to go to arms basically had to go to arms in certain villages. No one wanted to pick up an AK-47 and go fight for their country, but they had to. In America, in my opinion, it's way too stable and life is way too easy. So think about it this way, you have children, I have children. Am I going to go fight in the U.S. Army to go fight for someone else's wars overseas? Of course not. Am I going to go pick up arms, and choose to go fight when I have 3 hot meals a day, hot running water,
Right.
my kids,
Yep.
all that stuff? Of course not. Why would anyone do that? But it doesn't come to that until it comes to you, until you have to pick up the metaphorical AK-47. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
So with all that being said, I think life is still incredibly easy in the United States and also in the West in general, to where people have to manufacture movements to fight for. It's in every human that they want to fight for something,
Mm-hmm.
but some of these fights are very
Misplaced. Yeah.
artificial, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's such a great point. And that's, again, like you can't even have these conversations, unfortunately, in many places in society, most of society. Speaking of war or fighting and stuff like that, obviously the stuff going on right now, we won't get into detail, not to ruffle too many feathers, but I would love for you to touch on just defunding war and like how, Bitcoin, because again, you and I talked offline too. We've talked a little bit about like how, we were like, I was very political, or like you said, you were, red pilled, like you were a Bitcoiner before Bitcoin is even a thing, right? Like this was us in the 2000s as young kids, as teenagers, as early 20-year-olds. And it was something inside of us. And then you eventually, 10 years later, we stumble upon Bitcoin, and it's like, whoa, this is the thing that's the answer to all these things that I was sensing as a child, basically, as a young adult. What is it that you see in Bitcoin that when people say, oh, it can defund war? Because again, that's a big thing obviously coming out right now. A lot of Bitcoiners talking about that as soon as these things were happening, and people are like, hey, this can defund war. Like Bitcoin, it kind of comes back into lexicon. So what is it that Bitcoin does for the average person listening in that makes it hard for people to all of a sudden start sending the other people's boys and girls to a war if you're on a Bitcoin standard?
Well, not even I mean, I agree with you with the humans, the boys and girls part, but it's just the money. The money's made up, dude. When the money's
Yeah.
made up, you can just send hundreds of billions of dollars overseas to foreign entities and there's no repercussions, right? Because you just print more. That's how modern monetary theory works. It's not like your family's balance sheet or my family's balance sheet where my wife makes X, I make X, we spend Y, and there's our budget, right? Federal budgets, especially when you're the world reserve currency, they don't work like that, okay? Maybe Zimbabwe can't do that, but the United States can. So my point is that I think a lot of people are kind of getting fed up with it. And if I had to describe myself as anything, it's probably like classical liberal, and that used to be
Yep.
like conservative.
Yes.
So
Yep.
anti-war, freedom
Yep.
of speech, smaller corporations, all that stuff. But anyway, that's like a weird, controversial viewpoint now in 2025. You're against war? What?
Yep.
So my perspective is unique because, and yours, you're the same age as me,
Yep.
but we went through 9/11, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, bombing of Yugoslavia in
Jeez.
1999. Yeah. I've held NATO bomb fragments in my hands. When I go
Wow.
back to Serbia, my dad's city, it used to be a post office. Now it's a big hole in the ground, right? This was during the
Jeez.
1999 bombings. So I've seen all this stuff firsthand. So I think a lot of people, when they talk about, war and all that stuff, until they've seen it firsthand, to them it's almost like a game, like a video
Yeah, I was
game.
gonna say a
Like,
video
oh,
game.
it's
Yep.
Halo, we're just blowing each other up. Like, no, this is real, dude.
Reset
So until
button.
you see it in person, I don't know why anyone would want to go through war or wish that upon anyone. But to your point on how it defunds it is that Bitcoin is finite. You can't just print, a couple hundred trillion or a couple hundred billion and send it overseas, right? So I think when it comes to a finite resource or a scarce resource like Bitcoin, which is verifiable, which gold is not, US dollars are not, I think you have to be very strategic in how you use those resources. So it's like, hey, let's say our treasury has, I'm just making this very small for argument's sake. Say we have 10 Bitcoin that the federal government holds, right? What percentage do we use towards war? What percentage do we use towards transportation? What percentage do we use towards infrastructure? And I think things change when you can't just, two mouse clicks and print, billions of trillions of dollars, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So in my
Yeah.
opinion, that's how it defunds it. You can still go to war, but you're going to use a big chunk of your reserves to do so.
It really is incredible. You touched on something too, and we don't need to go down the rabbit hole necessarily. I mean, you can touch on it here if you want, but it's like the weaponization of words. It's like you said, the classical liberal that used to be the fiscally conservative person. They were against war, like all these things, and then it's been co-opted. Like I feel like Fiat weaponizes all these, like Social Security, right? Like we've bastardized all these words, and that's what Fiat does. Like you don't even know, you can't define words, and now we've actually seen the redefinition of words, literally. Not just figuratively over the last 100 years. So it just, again, another thing Fiat just absolutely destroys.
I was just going to say, to finish my, not the war point, but the previous point, because I don't want to come off as like, oh, this guy's a finance guy. He wants Bitcoin to become part of finance. That's not the point. What I was going to say is it's after 2020, after COVID, if you don't understand what money is, you're an idiot. Okay. If you don't understand why everything at Home Depot went up 150% or at the grocery store went up 100%, you are literally an ostrich with your head in the sand. You are literally the meme of, hey, that's crazy. Catch the game last night, the guy in front of the grill, right? I wish I was that guy. I want to be that guy. That's my favorite meme of all time. And also the midwit meme with the bell curve.
Yeah.
But my point is after 2020, if you were, 15 years or older, let's call it 5 years ago, and you still don't understand money, that's on you, dude.
I couldn't agree more. So, you have a 20-year background, really, 10 years publicly of building and teaching millions of people over that time period. And there's not many people that can say that. So it's, what are the 99% getting wrong about money? And that's why, again, we talk about these like couple percent, trying to get just a couple percent of people that think like we do to understand and pull society over. Why? So you've seen thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of comments, things come across your radar on all the different platforms over the last 10 years. What is it like? Why are people liking especially the young generation, liking socialism so much? It's socialism and communism has killed, millions and millions and millions of people over the last, just century alone. Why is it that people are liking socialism? And is it just really as simple as like the printing of the money, the inflation, that the Cantillon effect, and those at the top getting everything? And I would love for you to just unpack some of this and why we're seeing this. And I was just listening to a Jeff Booth, handful of videos this week of Jeff Booth just going down that rabbit hole again, and just him talking about deflation. And obviously technology is very deflationary. And so I would love for you to unpack this a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, why do people buy shit coins? It's the same answer, because they want to get rich quick, or they feel like they're so disenfranchised with the current system that Bitcoin's only going to go up maybe 30, 40, 100%. I want to hit the 1000x. I want to hit the 2000x. So that's why people buy shit coins. Why are people sports betting more than ever now? Is it late stage empire? Is it because the money's broken? Do they feel disenfranchised? Probably. So the way that I look at it is everything that's connected to the financial system goes up in price. Stocks, real estate, anything that's connected to that financial system. So I'm, the area that I'm in, let's call it, houses were literally, let's just say $100,000 in 2012, 2013. Those same houses are now $400,000 or $500,000. Okay. So at what point do you feel that the American dream, and when I say American dream, I just mean the dream of, owning a home, starting a family, not being a perpetual renter your entire life, having pride in ownership, right? Pride in community. When that doesn't feel achievable, kids are too expensive to have. I can't have kids. Houses are too expensive. I can't buy a house. Cars are too expensive. I have to summon the Uber or take the bus, right? So at what point do you feel disenfranchised with this system, which is currently capitalism, to your point, to where you just want to do the other thing, which is communism or socialism, where everyone gets a little slice of the pie and we all pay 50, 60% income tax, right? So here's the thing. I see it from both sides. I go to Europe a lot where taxes are 30, 40, 50%. I live in the United States where taxes are 30% and I get half the things that Europeans do. But I have a more materially rich life and salaries are higher, things like that. So at what point, do you choose one or the other? So to your point, I think that younger people are more enamored with socialism, get a slice of the pie, communism, just because the money really is broken and everything's so expensive. If you just look at how much wages have gone up and you look at how much asset prices have gone up, it's pulling the middle class. It's making middle class smaller and making the diametrically opposed between the haves and the have-nots even bigger.
Everything you are learning in this episode is completely moot and does not matter if you hold Bitcoin and are still leaving it on an exchange or sharing keys and your KYC information with a third party. This is your wake-up call now. You are only self-sovereign if you alone hold the keys to your wealth. 100% self-custody sounds daunting at first. Believe me, I lost 2 years of massive gains over a decade ago because I was worried about taking the few minutes it took to understand self-custody. And that's exactly why you need to talk to my friends, Tony Yazbek and his team at the Bitcoin Way. We just interviewed Tony recently, has over 80,000 views, an overwhelming response. People love his story and the simplicity he shares of how easy it is to custody and take ownership of the greatest money we've ever seen. They'll train you to do it right the first time. Head on over to thebitcoinway.com/Brandon to schedule a free 30-minute consultation today. Their 5-star rated service is exactly what you need. Quit sitting on your hands like I did and get started today. Again, that's thebitcoinway.com/BRANDON. Now that you have the team in place, you need the professional tools. My partners at Stampseed have them for you. Do not save your generational wealth on paper. Save it in titanium. It's estimated that 30% of all Bitcoin is lost forever, and that's only going to increase. Do not be a statistic. Go to Stampseed, check out with code Brandon, BRANDON, for 15% off store-wide. Save your generational wealth in titanium for generation after generation and sleep well at night. Do you think that we're in an invisible crash right now? And this is something you and I talked offline a little bit about. It's the Mike Maloney stuff, like just again talking about the beginnings of 20 years ago and kind of going down these rabbit holes of Mike Maloney always used to measure everything against other assets, to get, he always say that everyone knows the price of things, but knows the value of nothing. And when you're taking the stock market and you're dividing it against gold, or you're taking the stock market and dividing it against Bitcoin or something like that, it's obviously very extreme when you look at everything against Bitcoin, because it's just going all down in Bitcoin terms. Do you think that we're in this invisible crash? Like, I guess for a long time, I thought there was going to be, after 2012, after a bottom, I thought it would go up for a few years and then crash back down again. And there's a lot of people thought that. I mean, the Robert Kiyosaki's of the world, the Mike Maloney's, the Harry Dents, the Jim Rickards. I mean, you go through, I mean, all the people we've studied for years, everyone thought the world was going to end in the next few years again. Like this, just wait, guys, it's going to come crashing down. The Fed's screwed, everyone's screwed. Here we are 10 years later, after that, even when everyone thought it was going to crash. And, 2016 was the year like, oh, all the baby boomers are starting to just have to take their distributions and like things are going to go down. It's always like the Chicken Little. I mean, these guys get made fun of now mercilessly for their calls. Yeah. But in the world that we lived in for a long time, that would have happened. Like it would have been like, yep, this is pretty predictable. Like we're going to crash. And then the Fed has just kicked the can down the road through the printing and the yield curve control, like quantitative easing, all these different things. So is Bitcoin that measuring stick, or that control in the experiment was just staying steady and just showing, hey, everything is crashing actually, but it's just crashing against Bitcoin?
Well, I think money goes to where it's treated best, right? Mm-hmm. So, obviously a lot of it's gravitating towards Bitcoin. But I will say this, I think a lot of Bitcoiners, I mean, they're starting to understand this because people are posting about it on Twitter. But if you just look at M2 money supply, Bitcoin basically just lags that by a few months, right? So when they stop printing money, Bitcoin goes down. When they print money, Bitcoin goes up. So to me, I still think Bitcoin is, and it should be in everyone's portfolio, it's the apex predators, and it's the best performing asset, over the last 10, 15 years. But I also will say that I like to play both sides of the game. What does that mean? So if you look at think of like a barbell. Sorry, I'm trying to put my hands up. If you think of a barbell, nothing in the middle, and then the barbells are on each side. So what are those sides? One side is very conservative, cash, T-bills, things like that. The other side is, could be stocks, could be investing in your buddy's startup company, could be alternative assets like, gold, Bitcoin, guns, ammo, trading cards, whatever.
Yep.
So that's kind of how I invest. I try and play both sides. And a lot of Bitcoiners don't like hearing that. But think about it. If you know that the game is rigged, metaphorically rigged, yep, why wouldn't you play that game? Why wouldn't you put your money and benefit like everyone else has from the, Cantillon effect, basically? So that's the way that I look at it. I have a bunch of stocks. I have a bunch of Bitcoin. I have a bunch of LeBron James rookie cards. I have a bunch of, yep, whatever. So I just try and play both sides of the game. So a lot of people don't like to hear that. But my percentages, for anyone listening, has always been about 15% of my net worth in Bitcoin. And this is back when Bitcoin was like low 4 digits. Okay. So it's a much bigger number now, yep, in 2025, to where it's actually grown to about 20 something percent of my net worth. And that's a material number. It's, yep, not like a, hey, 10 grand, whatever. It's a big number. So my point is that the rest of that is real estate, stocks, collectibles, precious metals, cash, a little bit of everything. But Marko, cash is trash. Why would you have that as part of your portfolio? It's for opportunities, you guys. Okay, so I have a war chest. My mentality has always been, if you're a single guy, maybe save 3 months in cash just for emergencies, right? If you're someone with a family, maybe 6 months. If you're a commissioned salesperson, maybe 12 months. If you're a business owner and your income is all over the place like a roller coaster, maybe 18 months. And then you use that for opportunities. So when the S&P 500 was crashing after Trump's Liberation Day, I bought a bunch of stocks, and guess what happened? Now it's up and to the right, which is going to keep happening because they keep kicking the can down the road. So play both sides. Some people say, well, then you're just funding traditional finance. At the end of the day, you can sell that and buy more Bitcoin. You can sell that and buy assets that will preserve your family's legacy over time. When I log into my stock portfolio, do I realize that these are just pixels on a screen? Yes, I understand that. When I look at my Bitcoin holdings, do I understand that this is the hardest asset ever created in human history? I also understand that as well. But I'm one of those people where I create a swan portfolio, sleep well at night. I allocate each percentage as a slice of a pie. So let's say Bitcoin's 15, 20%, say cash is 5%, say stocks are 20%, whatever. And if any of those slices goes to zero, I'm not going to go drink myself to death or jump off a building, right? So that's kind of the way I live my life. And you know this with kids. If you're a single guy on Twitter and you're talking smack, oh, why aren't you 110% Bitcoin? Because I don't want to be, okay? Ironically, I own significantly more Bitcoin than the single guy talking shit on Twitter too.
Oh man. Yeah, it's
Does any of that make sense? And I know your
yeah,
Bitcoin
it's
audience is probably not going to want to hear this, but it
no,
is what it is. I sleep very well at night.
I mean that's the world I come from too. And again, I was telling you, our stories are very similar, obviously, and I come from that world too, like the real estate world, raising money, having this, the dragon portfolio, and all these things,
Yeah,
right, or
Chris
whatever,
Cole.
like
Yeah,
yeah, like years ago, whatever. There's all these
yeah,
different
Chris Cole.
portfolios, and that's the world I come from as well. And it is hard to get away from that when because whatever you grow up in to a degree is like, that's how you see the world. And you're like, it is hard. So you can see why it is hard for people to even go to Bitcoin, especially older crowd. Or like, oh, I've known this my entire life. So like, why would I, if I've done well, or I have a couple million net worth or whatever it is, or heaven forbid, someone has even more than that. Of course, they're going to be like, the hell, get out of here with this Bitcoin thing, man. Like, who cares? I've done well
Everyone's
in the
going to
fiat system.
gravitate to how they made their money.
Yeah,
If you made
exactly.
money in real estate, you're going to stay in real estate. If you made money in Bitcoin, you're going to stay in Bitcoin. If you made money with a business, you're going to keep creating businesses.
Yep.
The highest ROI you can get, you guys, is starting your own business other than
Yeah.
Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin's done obviously very well, but it hasn't if you bought at 111, right? So for me, I think the highest ROI for anyone listening to this, especially if they have that itch of entrepreneurship, is start your own thing, dude. For every dollar you put in, you're going to get back 20,
Yep.
But I didn't mean to interrupt you. What I meant to just finish that thought with was, once you build a solid foundation, so I'm completely debt free. I have no mortgage, no auto loans, no nothing. Okay. I have literally no debt. That's stupid in this system. This system rewards leverage, right? The Robert Kiyosaki, take
Yep.
on as much debt as possible. Not having debt is dumb. But guess what I can do now? I sleep well at night. I can play with my kids on a Tuesday in a t-shirt and shorts. And I chose to build that life. So I think you need to get to the first milestone, whether that's one Bitcoin, whether that's a net worth of, a couple $100,000, whether that's owning a home outright, whatever your milestone is, then you can kind of slowly let your foot off the gas. I think a lot of Americans, man, I mean, you see people, they're in their 70s, signing receipts at Costco, whether they
Yep.
want to do that or not, or they're bored, or I don't know. That's not how I want to live my life. I want to retire in my 40s, not my 70s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that Bitcoin will allow you to do that a lot quicker, but you need to know what stage of life you're in. Are you in, hey, I have 0.1 Bitcoin, or I have 4 Bitcoin, right? You need to understand what stage of life you're in. If you have 0.1 Bitcoin and you want to get to 1 Bitcoin, you got to grind, dude. You got to pick up some extra shifts. You have to do something, right, to get to that milestone. Once you get to that milestone, then you can reevaluate. But to me, the biggest hypocrites are the people on Twitter that have nothing,
Mm-hmm.
relatively speaking, and they're criticizing others who have significantly more, who busted their ass to get there. I'm not talking about some trust fund babies or anything like that. I'm talking about Bitcoin rewards those who have discipline and patience and have the ability to save in hard money. The other side of that is take out as much fake money as you can, buy hard assets with that. That's what smart rich people do. They take out fake money, they buy real assets with it. Real estate, Bitcoin, whatever you want to call it. And I think we're going to get to that stage of borrowing against your Bitcoin and treating it like commercial real estate and all that stuff. I don't think we're there yet, but if it stays the pristine asset that we all know it is, it's going to be pristine collateral. And then you can just borrow against it and have multi-generational wealth like all these other people have traditionally done with real estate.
So you did just touch on something, obviously, getting to 1 Bitcoin, or, stacking 0.1 Bitcoin for the average person. Obviously, Bitcoin keeps running away from everyone, right? So what is
Mm-hmm.
it, I can hear people saying, well, Marko, look, like you're saying, like, this is why I need to go to altcoins, or this is why I need to like go do these other things, is I can't get a return in Bitcoin anymore. Like if I just stack
Exactly.
and I'm trying to get to 0.001 Bitcoin or 0.1 Bitcoin, that's not going to do anything for me someday. So what do you say to people when they're, because it's all over the internet. Obviously you see it. I mean, as a YouTuber, like you go through these different cycles of like 0.1 Bitcoin is going to retire, this and that and blah, 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 blah. Is that a real thing? Is that just clickbait, or is that something that people will be able to, if you're stacking, providing more value than you're consuming, and you stack 0.01 or 0.1, that eventually someday you'll be able to retire in your 40s or 50s or 60s?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on if the supply or the demand is greater than the supply. That's all it basically boils down to. When a lot of people make the comparison of like, oh, Bitcoin is just greater fool theory, you need someone else to buy it. I mean, that's called a market. That's how everything works, right? Can I list a Ford Focus with 700,000 miles on it for $1 million? Yeah, I could list it. Is someone going to buy it? No, of course not. So my point is that that's what stock prices are. Why is Microsoft valued at 40x its earnings, right?
Hmm.
Because someone thinks it's going to be worth that in 40 years, right? So anyway, my point is that is it attainable? Can you retire off point 0.1 Bitcoin? I have no idea. It all depends on the individual. Some people, want to eat caviar every night. Some people can eat ramen noodles every night. It all just depends on your spending. My rule of thumb from a traditional finance point of view has been once you reach 25x your annual expenditures, the 4% rule, you can then peel off 4% every year. And if the money grows at, let's say, 6, 7, 8%, you'll actually never really touch that principal. And you can then, quote unquote, at least retire for the next 25 years. So Bitcoin has allowed me to basically do that, for the amount that I own and all that stuff and traditional assets that I own. But for other people, should they grind? Should they drive Uber? There's a friend of mine, Lindsay Stamp. She's on Twitter. She
Yep.
drives Uber and takes all that money from Uber and buys sats with it. Good for her. Um, Other people, I don't know. I mean, some people feel like they need to gamble. They need to buy the shit coins. Oh, Marco, I gamble in shit coins and I plow it back into Bitcoin. Well, you can just buy Bitcoin in the first place, right? And you can create a steady, predictable form of, I don't want to say return because returns aren't guaranteed, but you're buying a blue chip as opposed to pink sheets, over the counter
Hmm.
bullshit penny stocks, right? That's the way that I look at the altcoin market. Oh, but they have utility somewhere else. They can be a token in a video game or provide transactions for this business to whatever. That's great, but for me, I'm treating Bitcoin as the base layer of money. So everyone needs to read Nick Badia's Layered Money because that's the way that I look at Bitcoin. I think at the end of the day, nation states are going to realize that I don't want to deal in dollars anymore. China, Russia, Brazil, South Africa. They're like, I'm done, right? But the problem is it's not the problem, it's the truth. United States military, petrodollar, world reserve currency, influence all over the world. People need and want dollars. That's why the dollar hasn't Zimbabweed. Okay. That's why prices have only gone up 50%, 100% instead of, 10,000%. People still need the dollar. Look at Turkey. They use the dollar. Look at Lebanon. They use the dollar. So until that demand is no longer there, I'm still buying the S&P 500 and I don't care. Um, so but I'm also buying Bitcoin as well. So I'm just trying to keep it balanced in that barbell. So for younger people, I don't know. I can see their point of view. It's hard, especially when you're young, because you can't see the forest for the trees.
Hmm.
And there's studies that with kids, the kids that can delay gratification, they did this with marshmallows. The one kid, didn't eat the marshmallow. You get 2 marshmallows, right? And the kids that did that, they're way more disciplined as opposed to the kid just eating the marshmallow right away. But I think a lot of humans are like that. Hey, I want the new Dodge Ram. I want the boat. I want the jet ski. Let me just finance it, right? For me, the biggest thing that I see with Americans is that they can only process things in monthly payments. What's my monthly payment? Oh, it's 96 months, 7% for this Kia Telluride. Let me
Hmm.
finance a car for 96 months, right? Hey, it fits in my budget. So they need to get out of that monthly mentality and try and get into how can I make the most amount of money possible ethically and legally, okay, doing something I relatively like and turn that into a automated stream of buying Bitcoin, saving a little bit in fiat for a rainy day, and buying assets that are going to go up in value over time. That's the way that I look at it.
Yeah, it's so well said. I think that the thing that's really tough is we're in the like the early adopters phase of Bitcoin, and there's that not a meme, but it's the thing that's kind of gone around whatever Twitter, just social media, like the INTJ. A lot of Bitcoiners or early adopters are a certain personality type, and they're maybe they're more apt to take risk, whatever it might be. They're just innovator type mindsets, and I think a lot of us tend to be idealistic. Like we have the entrepreneurial mentality, like a personality type where it's like, yeah, I'm willing to go die on that hill. I'm willing
Mhm.
to, whatever it is. And
Disagreeable.
yeah,
Be
exactly. And
disagreeable.
it's,
Yeah.
it's tough, Marco. Like I feel like this is why this is why I'm writing this book too. And this is the 3% thing. I keep coming back to this. I talk a lot about this in a lot of the interviews I do. And I ask people about it because like I've just been resigned to, after 20 years, like you said, of we've been thinking about this really for 20 years. And so many people watching probably for 30, 40 years, thinking about these things and the money being broken, etc. And you kind of just like Pierre Rochard. I was interviewing Pierre like 2 months ago or whatever it was, 2 or 3 months ago. And he was like, yeah, I found Bitcoin in 2012. And I was like, cool, like done. Like in the next year, like everyone's going to figure this out. And like, we're good to go. And then he's like, here we are. Like,
Dude, I read his speculative attack article from like 2014,
mm-hmm.
2013. Do you remember that was the
Yes,
picture of the Joker lighting the money on
classic.
fire?
Yep.
Dude, I read that maybe in like 2017, 2016 or something like that. I can't even
Mm-hmm.
remember when I read it. And it's completely played out correctly. And it's unbelievable. And it's so funny because, dude, we all have these, it all went from like, maybe some weird internet nerds are going to buy it to maybe a small business is going to use it to maybe a publicly traded company is going to use it to maybe a nation state's going to buy it to maybe, and it's all
Yep.
playing out. So how can anyone that's actually being honest with themselves see how it hasn't been playing out? So if you guys want to talk, I know everyone wants to talk price. For me, the base case has always been, always. I'm not one of these people that thinks, 900 trillion, all the money in the world. I'm not thinking
Yep.
about that. Realistically, is Bitcoin better than gold? Yes or no, gun to your head? Of
Absolutely.
course it is.
Yeah.
Of course it is. So how are we not going to 10x? How are we not going to 10x? I've been
Yes.
saying this for years. I
Yeah.
interviewed
Yeah.
Nick
Yeah.
Badia, Jeff Booth,
Yep.
all these guys years ago, and that's always been my base case. It's always been 10x gold. That's it.
Yeah. 100%. And it's like we get idealistic and we tend to not be as pragmatic at times, I feel like, as Bitcoiners. And I'm going back to like what we were saying with like, I think of pets.com where, like they were, or some of these, like they were like, there's too early, right? Like where it was, they had the right idea and they were right, but they were too early. And that happens with, as you know, like a lot of entrepreneurs, like you might have the right idea, but you can't put it together correctly, or it's too early. The technology is not there yet, whatever it
Yeah.
is to cross that bridge and make it successful. And that's where I feel like the whole barbell thing and what you're talking about, it's a very pragmatic way of looking at things, because again, I know I get caught up in it of like being too idealistic at times, and you're like, yeah, this is going to be it. But it's like, yeah, but look behind you. Like no one's behind you. Like everyone else is like way, like they're out in left field, and like you're at home plate, and the cavalry ain't coming right now. And that's why I go back to like this 3% thing. Like we have to be pragmatic and understand, yes, is Bitcoin the black hole? They're going to print money forever, print currency, I should say, print currency forever. They have to, in perpetuity. So yes, will it gain in purchasing power and suck all that in over time? Yeah, but it's not happening today. And I think that's the thing, like we all struggle with as Bitcoiners. So I think that's like a huge thing, but at the same time, 97% won't get it. They never will. And we just need to find a couple of percent that do, to drag everyone across the finish line.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. My bear case against Bitcoin, I've realized this. It's always been people are dumb. And when I say dumb, I'm not saying you and I are smart. I'm saying people choose to be ignorant because they don't want to learn about what money even is. Again, hey, I get my direct deposit ACH transfer every 2 weeks, and these are units that I'm going to use to buy things, right? They don't even know what it is. So people are dumb. And then number two is, I don't know how you feel about this, but quantitative computing, especially with how far AI has come along the past 2 years, that's the only thing that scares me. I understand you can fork it. I understand all that stuff. It's just that once you start seeing, and a lot of quantitative computing is vaporware in this day, I understand that. But what my big wake up call was, I used to play around with ChatGPT in March of 23 when it first kind of started getting a little bit more popular. And you're like, oh, okay, this is a novelty. It's fun. It's nice. It's cool. I'm never going to use this. Fast forward 2 years later, 2.5 years later, using ChatGPT now, it's night and day compared to what it was 2.5 years ago. So if technology really does accelerate that fast, those are the only two things that scare me. Most people are ignorant to what money is and quantitative computing. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you, like, I agree. I think it's like I'm scared of AI if we don't have a Bitcoin standard. I'll say that. But if we have a Bitcoin standard, then I feel like the incentives of society will lead people to then doing better things with it. Obviously, right?
Yeah.
So like that to me is like we're at that split in the road where it's like, what are we gonna choose? Like CBDCs and like bad AI, or are we gonna choose like
Yeah.
Bitcoin and like good incentives?
Well, real quick, Brandon, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I tweeted maybe a couple months ago. I go, dude, when basically all portfolio managers, financial advisors, once they all get replaced by AI, which they inevitably will, what do you think the AI is going to buy? It's going to buy the best money. It's going to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So I think
Physical
AI
gold, Marco.
may actually boost Bitcoin adoption, because it's just going to think logically and say, well, this one's made up. This has more properties of sound money. So yes, I'm going to put my clients into Bitcoin. You know what I mean?
100%. And that's why I go back to like even I would love your thoughts on like just the altcoins in general, like that people get into like the XRP army and like all these things. It's like, guys, you're the G or someone like these guys aren't buying XRP. Like you should be able to tell, you know the truth by like what your enemies are doing, at least your perceived enemies, your quote unquote enemies. Like if people can fight like, well, they're not really enemies. I get it. But like, what are the adversarial countries doing to like, are they buying XRP? Are they buying ETH? Like what are they buying? Like they're not even buying treasuries, the risk-free asset. They're not even buying treasuries anymore, for crying out loud.
They're buying gold.
Right. They're buying gold and they're talking about Bitcoin. So it's like, that's the signal. That's the forest in the trees, like you said earlier.
Yeah, I think to your point, Bretton Woods, let's call it whatever, 70, 80 years ago. And then you had, getting off the gold standard. Fiat is so relatively new but people that live in it, they think that this is how money's been forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't. The biggest wealth was always landowners, right? Landowners, tangible assets, real estate. And then it kind of transitioned to fiat, if that makes sense, through stocks and stuff like that. But think about it logically. If you look at when mortgage rates were 14, 15, 16%, why would I invest in stocks that get me 10% when I can pay off my mortgage and make a guaranteed 16% rate of return? Why would I invest in stocks when my savings account is yielding 8, 9, 10% guaranteed, right? All this stock stuff is a relatively new phenomenon, basically since like the 90s to 2000s with .com. No one really invested. I mean, that's not no one. That's not, I'm just talking out of my rear end. But stocks weren't as popular as they are today, as they were 30, 40, 50 years ago. Why would I invest in stocks when I could just pay off my mortgage? Why would I invest in stocks so I could just put my money in a savings account?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I think a lot of people don't realize when you pay off debt, you're just making a guaranteed risk-free, tax-free rate of return of whatever that interest rate is. Okay. So if I pay off a car loan that's 15%, I just made 15%. Why would I put in stocks where I make 10, right? So I think to your point, I think Bitcoin, just with its CAGR, its compound annual growth rate, and what it's done over the past 10, 15 years, I mean, it's just a no-brainer. If you're on zero, you're wrong. If you're 100%, you're wrong. That's the way I feel. Mm-hmm. I know it's going to anger a lot of people, but I think 100% is wrong. I think 0% is wrong.
Well, is there tail risk too? I mean, like this is why I go back to like the idealistic versus pragmatic. And again, Bitcoiners, it's a group of very idealistic people, the change makers and the Steve Jobs quote. And so like, that's great. And we need that. Those are the revolutionaries. Those are people dragging everyone across the finish line, but it is not now. It's not this second. It's not today. And that's like, we have to live. We have a tough job, is we're living in two worlds, right? We're living in this fiat world and the Bitcoin world. So it's like
100%.
Yeah. Like you're grappling with it 24/7. It's very tough. You're dealing with people objecting to it and you're trying to live here. And then you're answering questions about over here and living and paying taxes in this world. I mean, it's a very convoluted world and it causes a lot of heartache.
But look at our age group. You and I are the same age. We're, mid-late 30s. Half our life was zero technology, bicycles from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. to knocking on the door. Hey, can Brandon play?
Yeah.
Hi, Miss Gentile. Can Brandon play? To AOL Instant Messenger, middle school, high school, then cell phones, and then, the Matrix. It's literally, I think we're the last generation where it's kind of like half real life, half digital life, if that makes sense.
100%. Anyone... basically, like you said, 35, 40 and over, like you were that last remnant of people who you could get away with things in high school, right? Like you're doing ridiculous things or something in middle school and you're like, it wasn't caught on camera or TV or something.
Yeah,
like that.
100%. And if it was like, 140p or whatever.
Yeah,
It's like it
exactly.
looks like it was recorded with
Someone
a
was playing
potato.
Snake on their phone anyway, so they didn't catch it.
Yes.
Like
The Nokia brick.
the
Dude,
Nokia.
listen to this, bro. So I had my phone died in college, so my mom had a pink razor. So for like a whole semester, I had
Oh
like a
boy,
pink Motorola razor, dude.
you were
It
the
was
talk of the
so
town.
funny. Then I got
That's
the
amazing.
BlackBerry. We're playing Brick Breaker. But yeah, it's
Unreal.
different, man. It's different. And I
Different
think
time.
to your point earlier with the timing aspect, do people remember Friendster? Do they remember MySpace?
Right.
No, all they remember is Facebook and everything else now. Remember Vine? Vine was
Oh yeah,
TikTok
that
before
was
TikTok.
so
That was
huge.
10 years
Yeah.
ago,
Yes.
longer,
Yeah.
more than 10 years ago.
It.
So I think time is almost like, I don't want to say a big circle, but I think what is old is new again.
Mhm.
Look at like bell bottom jeans. Those are popular now
Yeah.
again. That wasn't popular for 20, 30 years. I think that Bitcoin, though, the thing that sets it apart from bell bottom jeans and Friendster and MySpace is that we like to use this analogy. It's like discovering fire. It's like inventing the wheel.
Yeah.
It's its own thing, and it's the new paradigm of the new way. And I think that it's not just first mover advantage. It's that no one knows who created it. It's public. It's transparent. It's everything that people want in money. But
Yeah.
when I don't know if it's the name, I don't know if it's sats, I don't know if it's the marketing, I don't know what it is, but people, normies just can't grasp it. And I think to my point earlier, that comes from 70 to 80% of people just not even knowing what money is. And then that subset of 20, 30% that kind of understands it, they don't understand currency, the difference between currency, money, central banking, all that stuff. So I just think that grassroots is not going to get us there, dude. I really believe that. I know that sounds negative, but it needs to be, again, metaphorically forced upon us in a way that normies just use it. Hey, I get my ACH transfer every 2 weeks. I get my Bitcoin every 2 weeks. It needs to become that.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm afraid you are correct, and that again, it goes back to this idealistic versus pragmatic of we would love all people to adopt it privately, individually, by themselves, running a node in self
Yeah.
custody.
Yeah.
It's just that's unfortunately not how life plays out, and that's where I kind of resign myself to. Not that you don't fight for that side, and that's like we said, like that's the
No,
side you
of course
fall
not.
on, obviously, and like I'm going to die on that hill. However, we have to be pragmatic and realistic to understand most people aren't going to. They wouldn't be in Bitcoin if they couldn't get it in their ETF. They would have nothing to do with it at this point. But now maybe they start learning about it. And now they start like, this Bitcoin thing is starting to take off a bit more. And that's the thing too. The number go up crowd, again, the number go up crowd gets a bad rap from the, like you guys are statist and stuff like that. Again, I empathize with that. We fall on that other side, but at the same time, number go up is the best marketing aspect of Bitcoin. Like most people aren't having to
100%.
flee their country with their wealth in their head. Fortunately, like we're so grateful that that's not the case. And that's how we're orange pilling people by like, I've got to flee my country. So number go up, hopefully is the best marketing aspect we have to get people into Bitcoin and not these other bad things that might happen to sell Bitcoin.
For me, the biggest difference between gold bugs and Bitcoiners are that gold bugs are pessimists. Oh,
Yeah.
World War III, nuclear war,
Yes.
nuclear winter,
Mad Max.
guns,
I know.
ammo. And then Bitcoiners are optimists. No, this is a different thing.
Yeah.
I can opt into a different thing finally for once in my life. And I think that's the biggest difference between
100%.
gold bugs and Bitcoiners.
Yeah, I love that you said that because that was, again, our backgrounds are so similar. And like being a gold bug silver guy for years, I mean, it was just like you get very pessimistic and you can't not get pessimistic because that was like the only way you succeeded. And then that's when
Yeah,
that was one of the reasons I got
exactly.
orange pilled. Yeah, it was like that was seeing the log chart, holding wealth in your head. But then that was the other, like the third pillar that really put me over the edge, in 2017, 18, when I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is actually like a hopeful thing instead of like gold where you're like, world's gonna burn and maybe I'll be okay.
Yeah.
So that was huge.
I also think most people, it's almost like I firmly believe that everyone should be a server at a restaurant at least once in their
mm,
life or own a
yes.
motorcycle, and then you'll respect motorcyclists and how
Yeah.
hard serving is. I think everyone should make one Bitcoin on-chain Bitcoin transaction, whether it's custodying it themselves or whatever that may be. Me sending it to Brandon privately. Hey, I like Brandon's shirt. Let me send him some sats. He'll give me a shirt. Transacting in it. I think once they see how it works, with all the confirmations and all that stuff, then a light bulb moment kind of goes off and says, holy shit, I'd have to wait 3 days for Western Union or my bank or this wire transfer. This happened in relatively 40 minutes, give or take. And it doesn't have to be, we have the Lightning Network, we have other solutions that make it more like a credit card now. But just seeing the base layer, I mean, that could be used for nation states to transfer money. And I think once people understand that, I think we're small fish, retail use, oh, here's my Etsy store, give me some sats. Okay, yeah, that's really going to move the needle. No, it's when Russia and China are trading, oil and Bitcoin and stuff like that. I think that's going to be the big needle mover. And also just the fact that, again, it's finite and people can't really grasp that. Even gold bugs. And I don't know if you follow Sonny Poe. He's got the
Yeah.
picture of Leonardo DiCaprio in the $100 bill.
He's so good.
So, he's a good dude.
Yep.
And he cracks me up because he's like, gold, people like gold because it can't be verified. They can't actually determine how much is out there. That's why they like it. Because with Bitcoin, it's like, shit, I can see exactly down to the sat, how much is in this wallet and all that stuff. So I just think that's funny. But I think for transparency's sake, whenever you look at these science fiction movies and you have this wise council of all these, elders that sit on this council, do you think they're using fiat money? Like, no, humans are going to get to an agreement where it's like, hey, we're stupid monkeys going to war. We need to find something better for the sake of humanity. And until there's another threat, and I know I'm going all over the place here, but until there's a threat outside of humanity, let's just pretend it's an alien, okay?
Yeah.
Then humans will become more, hey, we're on the same team rather
yeah.
than, all that other stuff. And I'm not trying to get too philosophical, but I think if you really look, 100,000 years into the future, what are we going to use? Dollars with old guys' faces printed on them? That's paper? Of course not. It's just, it doesn't make any sense.
It goes back to like, these things are so, I don't want to say common sense, but they're just such principled like thinking. And when you zoom out a little bit, and that's again, like the ravages of fiat where you don't have time. Like the average person's on the hamster wheel, and it's sad because you
100%.
talk to some people, and I'm sure you've seen it over the years, where people are like, I get it. Like, I get what you're saying, but like, I'm trapped. And like, they don't say I'm on a hamster wheel, but they're like, what do I do? Like, I get homeschooling is amazing, or I get Bitcoin's the thing, but like, I literally can't live in that world because I'm trapped in this other world and I'm on the hamster wheel. And that's the ravages of fiat, whether it's war or you're on the hamster wheel and you can't make decisions that are the best decisions for you and your family because you're on that hamster wheel trying to get more fiat because all your expenses are going up every day in and day out. It's the wildest thing.
Dude, I'll give you a perfect example, Brandon. This happened to me literally yesterday. So I was getting my car windows tinted. Okay, I got a new car. My other car got T-boned. I was telling you, so I had to get a new car. I get this new car, I'm getting the windows tinted. So it's an all day process. And my wife, she was busy with the kids, my friends working, whatever. I didn't want to call an Uber. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go to the library while my windows are getting tinted. I'm going to work. And then I went to go get an Uber, and the Uber to go like, not that far, maybe 4 or 5 miles was like $60, $70. Maybe there wasn't. Yeah, it was something crazy. I'm like, this isn't right. So I took the bus. I took public transportation for the first time here in a long time. And when you look at just the different rungs of society, dude, do you realize how spoiled a lot of people are? When you take public transportation, I haven't done it in years, and you hear what these people are talking about. They're talking about like, yeah, meditation, and I can will these things into existence, and they're, broke, completely broke. I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying the reality of it. They're completely broke, and they're having all these big philosophical conversations, and you realize like, dude, you have more than you think you do. Put a little bit of it into Bitcoin, just save, think 10, 20, 30 years from now. The problem is when you're in that fiat system, to your point, you feel like you can't breathe. You're like, shit, I got to take the bus. I'm going to be late for work. I'm living paycheck to paycheck, hour by hour. Your time frame is just compressed so much more when you're living, day to day. You can't even think in weeks, let alone months, let alone years, let alone decades. So I think the people that do have, a little bit more leeway, they should be saving in Bitcoin. But the irony is that life is expensive when you're poor, especially in this country. And they're the people that probably need Bitcoin the most. It's the life raft.
Yeah.
Who's the guy that wrote Bitcoin for Black America? Was that Zay? I can't remember his name.
Jackson. Was that Zay?
Isaiah Jackson, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, I give that to all like minorities that ask me about Bitcoin. I just give them that book, because it's like, when you're in that lower rung of society, whether you're white, black, green, purple, doesn't matter.
Yep.
You're just kind of like, you're thinking hour to hour. Your time preference is so much higher,
Yep. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we were talking about this earlier too. And speaking of Bitcoin content, like even the Pierre thing, it was funny. I don't know if it was Nolan Bowerly or somebody I was listening to years ago, and they were just like, yeah, like all Bitcoin content stands the test of time. Like you can go back to a Bitcoiner, 14 years ago, ironically with Pierre, like we were talking about, or
Yeah.
Isaiah's book, or whatever, and it's going to be right. Like 20 years from now, it'll be right, and 50 years from now, it'll be right. And like you can't do that with any of the fiat garbage, like the Wall Street Journal or Paul Krugman's, ridiculous, editorials he puts out or whatever the hell he does all the time for 25 years. The internet's going to go away. It's just like the fax machine, all this stuff. So you have the fiat side, which is constantly wrong. It's constantly projecting. It's political currency. So it just has to be political talk trying to prop all these things up. And then you have
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoiners who are just like, yeah, here's the signal from all the noise, and it's going to be right. So quick side note that I was just thinking of, and you just made me think of that again. The 1 second decision, the thing, and again, we've been circling this about like the 3%, and what people, what the 97% or 99% aren't understanding and don't get is money is a decision. So in saying all that, money is just a psychological engine. And I think what's frustrating for a lot of us is that you could just make a decision. A couple percent of people could just say, I'm done with the dollar. It's worth nothing. And I'm switching to this thing that doesn't steal from me. I'm switching to Bitcoin. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what's so hard. And that's why like us living in these two worlds is very difficult, because we look at everyone else. Once you get it, you see the wizard behind the curtain, you're like, oh, like, why don't you just make this decision and come here? And then things would just start rapidly changing overnight across the world as a couple percent of people just make that decision. And that's that idealistic versus pragmatic, where it's like, yeah, that's just not how life works though. And so
I mean,
that's,
why are most people obese? Why doesn't everyone have a six pack abs? You know what I mean? It's
yes.
it's just human nature, bro. There's
Yep.
these sin industries that just humans are, alcohol, gambling, pornography, whatever it may be,
Yes.
And no one's perfect. Like, dude, I've played
Right.
soccer, I'll go have a couple beers. I'm not Jesus Christ. I'm just saying
Exactly.
that we're programmed to gravitate towards these things that we know that aren't good for us.
Yes.
It's like, hey, maybe I shouldn't get the Krispy Kreme donut, but it tastes good. So it's a lot of it comes from discipline, but discipline is not
It
easy,
only goes
man.
you so far.
Yeah. I also noticed, dude, when I go to Europe, dude, I know this is kind of a meme at this point, but I've known this my whole life. Dude, I can eat like a pig. I'm talking all the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that you're not supposed to eat. Red meat. In Serbia, we have this thing called kajmak. It's basically the cream of the milk. It's a spreadable
Mm.
butter, if you will.
Yep.
Dude, melting on top of, sausages and all this. It's the best food in the world. And it's everything you're not supposed to eat. And I feel great. I go to the bathroom regularly. I'm
That's
playing soccer. I
amazing.
feel great. And then I come back here. Everything just sticks to you, dude. It's all
Yes.
just like preservatives. It sticks to you. And I think that that's a symptom. Didn't Safety, or he didn't write it, but he was in
Yeah.
conjunction with
His
someone with Fiat
publishing
Food.
house. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know, man. I just feel like a lot of stuff, especially in I don't want to call it late stage capitalism or late stage empire, where you have to squeeze out a profit from everything,
Mm-hmm.
to where, the food doesn't even taste like food. You know what I mean? It just
Yes.
tastes like something that was kind of just literally scientifically thrown together to taste good. And it's all engineered.
It's insane. Do you think
Yeah.
we will have, transitioning just a little bit? Do you think we'll have super cycles at some point with Bitcoin, or do you think we'll have the 4-year cycle always? Like when you look at the ups and downs of the market, and I think again, like someone looks at log chart, it's just up and to the right because it's network effect, right? So it's very
Mhm.
deceiving. But that linear price chart, do you think we're going to have these cycles going forward? Really, in as far as the eye can see.
Yeah, so in our Bitcoin club here in Cleveland, we have a bunch of members. It's a really good club. He's actually really big on Twitter. I just don't want to put words in his mouth, so I'm not going to say who it is. He's of the 4-year cycle is done. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's his mentality. I am still a 4-year cycle guy, just because I was in the camp of like 2021. We're going to see $100,000 Bitcoin. Then you had China mining ban. You had a bunch of
Yeah.
stuff, right? FTX, all that stuff, and we went down to basically 16K. I have tweets. I ironically deleted my Twitter just because I spend too much time on it. I get into petty arguments with
Oh
with
man.
egg avatars. You know what I mean? Because I'm an idiot. So anyway, I'm just like, screw this. I'm done. So I deleted my Twitter, and I probably shouldn't have done that. But I could probably still recover. It's been less than 30 days. But anyway, my point is, since I have tweets from 2020 that just say, dude, it's going to be summer of 2025. We're going to see basically Q2, Q3, Q4 of 2025. And these tweets are 4 or 5 years old, saying that we're going to see, again, all-time highs. But then we had six-figure Bitcoin even before the halving, which was kind of
Mm-hmm.
crazy, or all-time highs before the halving.
Right.
Then we had six-figure Bitcoin back in, I think it was November of 24.
Yep.
So I'm still of the mindset of 4-year cycle, but I'm also still of the mindset of Bitcoin basically just tracks the S&P 500. And I know it's starting to diverge a little bit, but it's still a risk on asset. And the thing that drives me crazy about Bitcoiners, we're supposed to be these independent thinkers, these, smart, sharp people that think outside the box. And I see people, this was months ago when Larry Fink, I think, was at Davos or whatever, saying like, oh, Bitcoin is a risk off asset. And now everyone's like, oh, Bitcoin's a risk off asset. I'm like, you realize that his whole business model is assets under management. It's to get you to buy his thing, BlackRock's Bitcoin offering ETF.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say Bitcoin is a risk off asset, maybe 10, 20, 30 years from now, historically, we've been right, we've been correct.
Right.
But to say it's a risk off asset, come on, dude. Like, I still am not in that camp. Like, number has gone up, but we've also gone from 64 grand to 16 grand. Okay. And I think that's going to happen again, except the peaks are going to be, oh, we're going to go from 215 grand to, 115, right? So I still think it's going to be number go up, technology up and to the right. But to call it a risk off asset is still premature. And I think a lot of people are taking victory laps too early, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, it's so funny because this has been the theme of a lot of what we've been talking about, which is living in these two worlds. Like
Yeah.
right, like Bitcoiners, I feel like it's like you have the sailors of the world, or a lot of what we do, I feel like, is you're trying to move the Overton window, and then but you get people caught in the crossfire because you're like, well, you said it was a risk off asset. I'm like, yeah, it is a risk off asset.
It
will be
it
in the
is.
future,
It
but
will
like,
go. Yes. But right
but
now,
right
it's not.
now, yeah,
Yeah.
it's so wild because like, is it a store of value? Is this and that? It's like, I mean, yes, it is by definition a store of value because it's finite, but maybe right this second, it might not be a store of value, might lose value. You're right. So it's like, it's this weird world that you have to live in as a Bitcoiner and be able to explain, both
I'm
sides.
telling you, man, it's literally our whole lives. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why, half my life was zero technology. The other half is all technology.
Yeah.
And I feel like Bitcoin is right there. Half my
So
life,
true.
my formal education is a bachelor's degree in finance. I
Yep.
worked in capital markets. I worked in commercial real estate. I worked at publicly traded banks. And then the other half is like Mike Maloney, Zeitgeist, 9/11, all that stuff. It's kind of like, okay, like which is
Oh
which is
man.
correct. So I think that's the stem of my sleep well at night portfolio, having exposure to everything, just because living in those both worlds, it's like, okay, I don't know the future. I can't predict the future. So let me get exposure to a little bit of everything. And I know that's probably not going to maximize returns. But, at the end of the day, I sleep well at night, and that's all that matters. I can get hit by a bus tomorrow. You know what I mean? I want to be
Yes.
able to, I got to my milestones, thank God, because I found it early. And I believed in myself early, but now I can kind of take my foot off the pedal. So I'm speaking from a position of not privilege or whatever, because I still did the work. I still invested my money, when Bitcoin was 3 grand. But at the same time, I bet on myself and I believed in myself. And I'm not trying to turn this into some Tony Robbins cheesy, rah-rah type of rant, but I made my bets. My bets were correct. I have the ability to take my foot off the pedal. If I was 18 in 2025 at the time of this recording,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm making $12 an hour serving, $20 an hour serving, you got to take a percentage of that $20 and dedicate it towards those slices of your pie, those different asset classes. And if that's Bitcoin at 107 grand, maybe your 38-year-old self will thank you 20 years from now, right? You really have to adopt that mentality of, okay, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Next best time is today. And I think a lot of people, again, delaying gratification by eating the marshmallow or not eating the marshmallow. I think a lot of people, they want to eat the marshmallow because they see houses 5xing over the past 10 years, where it's like, I'm never going to be able to own a house. Let me become a socialist or a communist, to your point, So it's buying the shitcoin versus buying the Bitcoin.
Yeah, and it's the shortcut. There's no shortcuts, right? And that's the thing. Everyone's trying to shortcut the process. Like, I missed Bitcoin, whatever. But it's like you said, just provide value and save in it long term. So as it becomes a store of value over time that we know it is, and risk off asset, you'll play right into that, and all the printing that's going to happen through the governments and the central banks. It really is wild. Like, everything comes back to those questions of living in those two worlds.
For any young person listening to this episode, if you've gotten this far with my psychopathic rants, I appreciate it. For anyone listening to this that's younger, they have to keep printing. That's all.
Yes.
That's the one takeaway from this interview. They have to keep printing, period. Everyone's 401k depends on it. Everyone's Roth IRA depends on it. Everyone's 403b, 529 plan, it all depends on it. And if it doesn't, maybe it'll be French Revolution, guillotines in the streets, but I don't think so. I still think we're in bread and circus stage because it didn't happen after Enron. It didn't have to happen after 07, 08. We just had quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, 4, infinity. And that's all that's going to keep happening. Look at COVID 2020, March 2020 went down 20, 30%. You know how many people I had reaching out to me on my consulting platform to ask me, oh, I'm going to sell everything. I'm down. I go, dude, whatever you do, don't sell. They have to print. Guess what? 5, 6, 7 months later, new all-time highs. They injected the system with trillions. So they can do that until they can't. What does that mean? Until they get spread too thin, like all great empires have ended by being spread too thin, whether it's geographically, whether it's multiple wars on multiple fronts, whether it's the money being made up with, coin clipping or whatever you want to call it, or containing less silver than it used to. If you're looking at like the Roman Empire, for example. That's how all these great empires collapse, is too much expansion. When Napoleon tried to go into Russia, what happened? When Hitler tried to go into Russia, what happened? So you just have to look at it that way. Roman Empire, German, whatever. I don't want to call them Neanderthals, but barbarian tribes, war is a racket. War is very profitable. And when you need to hit that reset button, let's just start a little bit of war, baby. That's what happens every single time. And I hope to God it doesn't, but I don't know. We may be at that late stage of a bull market where we need a little bit of war. We've been in a 13-year bull market, dude.
Yeah, it's
longer.
It's wild. It's really wild. I could literally go for hours and hours with you, but I got to keep it somewhat timely. What do you think about the Bitcoin Treasury explosion we've seen? Like, is this taking over altcoin season? Like, I feel like all of a sudden, like Marko and Brandon are about to start a Bitcoin Treasury company here. We're going to start raising some capital and create an LLC, and like we're good to go. Like, what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, who remembers in 2017? When you had like beverage companies saying they were a crypto company. Do you remember what I'm talking about? And then like their stock shoots up, it was like Lemonade or something, or Nantucket. I can't remember who's like said like, oh, we're a crypto beverage company or something like that. So that's what I feel like Treasury companies are now. Look at MetaPlanet. They're the OG, MicroStrategy, the OG. You have Semler. I feel like we're in that like crypto beverage company stage of these Treasury companies. I feel like everyone and their mother wants to do it. And a lot of people are not going to like this, dude. And I don't care, because I really don't care. I'm in the late stage of my social media career. I'm kind of that old guy that's just talking shit. I feel like a lot of these Bitcoin influencers, dude, half of them, I feel like they don't even have that much Bitcoin. Let's just be honest. Is this like the elephant in the room? I feel like these people that are running these, I'm a treasury company, I'm this and that. It's like, bro, I don't even think you have that much Bitcoin. Like the Twitter influencers, I'm like, I think I have whatever. I'm not going to give specific numbers. But I feel like I have multiples of their Bitcoin. It's like, I'm just the personal finance guy. But ironically, on Twitter, I'm 100% Bitcoin content, which is kind of funny. So to answer your question about the treasury companies, I think a lot of it's just the money grab. I'll be completely honest. Some of it has, if you're like a sailor and you're a net positive, in my opinion, of Bitcoin. So some people say Sailor's a Fed. Some people say he's, huge, spokesperson. I like Sailor. I genuinely like him. But the late stage adopters, like the video game company in Japan is now a treasury company. It's like, really? Are you really a Bitcoin treasury company, or is this a money grab? Is your stock floundering and now you're all of a sudden a Bitcoin treasury company? Do you have a failing product and all of a sudden you're a treasury company? So that's kind of how I feel about this.
Yeah. It's going to be wild to see this moving forward. It really is. I mean, it's like we talked about the cycles earlier. What happens in these cycles as it inevitably goes up and down? Who's swimming naked? Who's not? What's going to happen?
100%. 100%.
What are your thoughts about just Bitcoin? So obviously, like you have Strike is coming out with their lending product. You've got a lot of just lending. Obviously, there's Let In and Unchained and stuff like that. What do you foresee with lending? Because again, this goes around this theme again of like what most people don't know, don't understand, right? It's kind of the theme of the show, but also there's a lot of Bitcoiners. We are living in these two worlds, which is another theme of the show, where we've talked a lot about having to live in both those worlds. So you have maybe a fair amount of Bitcoin, or even if you have 0.1, or if you have 1 Bitcoin or 2 Bitcoin or something like that, there's going to be this phase over the coming years here where people are going to want to lend because, again, we still live in this fiat world where the trade is, hey, let's borrow this in this depreciating currency and save in the hard money. So the lending side is getting bigger. There's more of these products, and more people are going to be at a point where they have the ability to lend against their Bitcoin. And so what do you kind of foresee here moving forward as the space kind of grows, and maybe, advice to people when they're kind of looking at this maybe?
Yeah, Brandon, I'm so glad you asked me this because I came from commercial real estate. So you know what rich families do? Let's say they own an apartment building that's worth, let's just say for easy numbers, $1,000,000. You know what they do? They take out a 50, 60% loan to value refi. They pull out $500,000-$600,000 tax free. They live off that. Their tenants pay off that mortgage, right? And they just rinse and repeat and keep doing that. Obviously, interest rates depend on, how much you can get away with. Rents, are your rents high enough to take care of that debt service? But that's basically what rich people do: is they buy, they borrow, they die. Okay. So in commercial real estate, there's this concept called a 1031 exchange. If I own that $1,000,000 apartment building, I sell it for $5 million. I have a capital gains of $4 million, right? Do I want to pay 37% on that $4 million in the form of, capital gains? Or it depends on your bracket, but just for easy numbers, no, of course not. So what do I do with the 1031 exchange? I need to find a like and similar property to buy for $5 million, and I can defer those tax gains. And I keep kicking the can down the road till I die. So now the $5 million building that I never paid taxes on 30 years later when I die is worth $15 million. I'm just making this up. My heirs get that property at the stepped up basis. They never paid taxes during that whole time of me trading these properties. I'm kicking the can down the road, and now I own a $15 million apartment complex and I've paid no taxes on it in 30 years, right? So I think with Bitcoin, it's going to become even more pristine collateral than multifamily. And that's what people are going to do. They're going to borrow against their Bitcoin, live on the fake money, the cash out refi, the $500,000-$600,000 in this example, and they're just going to keep doing that. The only problem with Bitcoin is that it is like gold. It has no intrinsic value. It doesn't throw off cash flow. Apartment buildings throw off cash flow. They have a net operating income. The problem with Bitcoin is that depending on whatever the interest rate is on the loan you take out against your Bitcoin, let's just call it 5% for easy numbers, Bitcoin needs to go up more than 5% for you to have a net wash or a positive gain. If Bitcoin goes up 0% and you're paying 5%, well, then you're out 5%. So the reason for giving you this whole rant is that I think people that own commercial real estate that have had it in their family for generations, they never sell because they just use it as pristine collateral to borrow against. It's almost like a business that has cash flow. The bank sees that it has cash flow. I'm able to slap on a 50, 60% loan to value mortgage, pull out that hypothetical 500-600 grand tax free, and live off that, right? So that's what people in real estate do. With Bitcoin, again, it doesn't have rents. You're not renting out rooms in a Bitcoin, right? So the number has to keep going up. And if that's the case, people are going to borrow against their Bitcoin, spend the fake money, and keep the pristine collateral in their family for generations. That's the way that I see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the only thing I would add, I 100% agree. Again, we have these real estate backgrounds, and that's the game, that's the trade, that's the yen carry trade. So for any advanced people listening, that's the Hugo Stennis trade, the yen carry trade. All these arbitrages are what Marko just explained. That's just another common American way. A lot of real estate investors do it or whatever. So yeah, that's fascinating. And then in saying that, the only thing I'll add is the self-custody aspect of, obviously self-custody is the revolution of Bitcoin. So if you're doing that and that's the route you choose to go, try to make sure you're custodying it properly, multi-sig, whatever it is, like find someone that's going to do that properly with you, and not rehypothecate your Bitcoin, stuff like that. So
100%. And I think the best practices for all that, it really comes down to teaching your spouse or teaching someone else. Like I'll be honest with you guys, it's probably sharing too much, but like if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, I don't know if my wife would be able to recover my Bitcoin, so I need to, you need to set up, most people, you got to set up a best practices, and whether that's through a third party or whether it's through multi-sig, whether it's through just teaching her or them or whoever it is. That's another thing, there is no FDIC insurance on Bitcoin. You lose it, it's gone, but that's also the beauty of it too. You are your own sovereign individual, which, Bitcoiners talk a lot about. and it's your choice to opt out. Like, if you look at like World War II, people were sewing gold into their, jackets, up their butt and their mouth,
Yep.
all that stuff, just to preserve some sort of wealth. And you don't have to do that anymore. You can remember 12 or 24 words.
Yeah, so true. I want to just handle price, where you think, again, we've talked markets, we've talked total addressable market, stuff like that. And we talked about the gold being the market cap. Like, where do you foresee things, maybe the end of this year, end of this cycle, in the next couple of years, in long term too? I'd like you to just kind of lay out your thesis of like how you think things progress. Is it kind of like a stair stepping, orderly? Is it, because like you get like the Giovanni with his power law, where it's more of like a stair step approach. And then you have like the Peter Dunworth. There's a lot of people are like, no, this is a finite asset. It's going to explode right through it. And like, you don't even understand how high this is going to get and stuff like that. So like when you look at all of that, which I know you are someone that loves learning and just seeing all this over the years, like what's your mental model of how you look at price, and maybe how it keeps going up into the right? Like what pattern does it take as it continues up?
Yeah, so I interviewed Cena. Cena's got a pretty good model. Originally I was like, okay, plan B makes sense. This was years ago. This was like 7-8 years ago. Plan B makes sense. That obviously got broken. You look at the power law, which is actually tracking pretty well, dude. I have a spreadsheet that I keep on my Google Drive. And every month I go in and say, okay, what's the power law? What's the price of Bitcoin? It's always been pretty close. It's 5-10% right there. So I don't know if it's power law. I don't know if it's plan B. I don't know if it's Cena's model. I don't know if it's any of this stuff. All I know, in my opinion, is that it's very simple. And I know this sounds very simplistic, overly simplistic, but I'll explain why. As long as the demand is better than the supply or greater than the supply, and more people are buying and selling, number will go up. Everyone knows that, but hear me out. What do I mean by that? Again, it went from internet nerds on a forum to maybe individuals, maybe small businesses, maybe publicly traded companies. And I think those fish keep getting bigger. The fish keep getting bigger. It's the Black Rocks, the Van Eycks. Those are big fish. What are the next big fish? Governments. What's after that? Central banks, right? So we still have a couple more layers above like the Black Rocks, in my opinion. We still have governments. We still have central banks. Once central banks start buying Bitcoin, that would probably be to their own demise. So they'll probably never do that. But as long as the fish keep getting bigger, if people genuinely believe the fish will keep getting bigger and adoption keeps growing, I mean, dude, it has to be 7-figure Bitcoin. I mean, I'm saying that, hand on the Bible, it has to be, just because it's math. Realistically, we've all seen 64 to 16. We've all seen the huge drops, right? I'm still a 4-year cycle guy. I'm still the only problem with that is that Bitcoin has only seen a bull market. And what do I mean by that? A stock market bull market. Last major crash we had was 2020. Before that was 07, 08. Okay. And 2020 was months, it wasn't years, like 07, 08. And before that was the dot-com bubble. So dot-com bubble and 07, 08 were prolonged recessions, if you will. 2020 was very quick. And then we had that like Liberation Day, a little bit of dip, whatever. And then it shot right back up. Until I see a prolonged bear market, I can't speak intelligently on the price of Bitcoin, because I still feel like it's so linked to the S&P 500 or at least money supply. So until the Fed can't keep printing, that'll be the real test. And if you look at the chart of M2 money supply, it did go down a little bit. And then now for the past year and a half, it's been going up and to the right. And that's why Bitcoin's going up and to the right again. So until I'm stuck between paradigm shift of people adopting it more, which I genuinely believe won't happen unless it's forced upon the majority of the population, versus bigger fish theory of like governments, central
bigger
banks,
liquidity
that kind of
pools.
thing.
Yeah.
I still think that we're going to be in 6-figure Bitcoin for a long time, but there's no doubt in my mind we may see, 70s or 80s again. It just depends on when it happens, right? We can go from 300 to 150. That's a 50% drop, but we're still at 150, right?
Right.
So all I'm trying to say is that no one knows, but I think directionally we've been correct and we're going to keep being correct. And that's for the foreseeable future. And in technology terms, to me, that's like 5-10 years. I can't say this is going to be a 30, 40, 50, 100-year asset. The principles will be 100% correct. To your point, all the Bitcoin material that's 10 years old is still applicable today, right? It's going to be applicable 100 years from now because it's like nature. You can't change nature. But technology does change. Will there be a better Bitcoin? Probably not. Will there be something that could threaten Bitcoin? Probably. So, hey, it's a big punny pot. If you want to go get it, it's, trillions of dollars. But this was a very long-winded way of saying, A, I don't know. B, it's going to keep going up and to the right for the next 5 to 10 years for sure.
Hey, directionally correct in the macro. That's all we can ask for. So that's,
yeah.
There's
Anyone else saying
answer.
anything different is, in my opinion, they're trying to play God. And I don't know. Anything could happen. We could have World War III, right? But Bitcoin is actually designed for something like that too. So there's always a pro and a con. I feel like we're kind of in the middle. It's the whole theme of this podcast.
It is. Truly is. Marko, any last words? This has been phenomenal. Any last words? Where can people find you? Send people off.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Brandon. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate people listening to the long rant. Sometimes I have too many ideas going on in my head at once. YouTube, WhiteBoard Finance. I talk a little bit about everything. Bitcoin, sound money, macro, real estate, personal finance, entrepreneurship, a little bit of everything, probably too many things. And then also Instagram, WhiteBoard Finance. And I also deleted my Twitter. I may be in the 30-day window. Maybe I'll recover it. I probably won't. I just spend way too much time on there. I just use an anon account now for research. But yeah, I would say WhiteBoard Finance on YouTube.
Amazing stuff. Could do this for hours. Marko, thank you for being a playable character in a sea of non-playable characters. Thank you, sir.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me, buddy.
If you like that episode, then you're going to love the playlist we put together for you with our most recent podcast with the top Bitcoiners, sound money, liberty advocates in the world. Go check those out here. We'll see you inside. You're going to love them.